A millionaire's pregnant wife is trapped in a life-or-death moment until a young boy from the poorest neighborhood steps in to save her. But when the millionaire meets his savior, the boy's one heart-wrenching request leaves him in tears. What could it be? Stick around to uncover the story that will break your heart and inspire you all at once. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more unforgettable tales. The alarm clock buzzed loudly, jarring Tyson awake. He blinked against the dim light streaming through the cracked blinds, pulling the thin blanket tighter around himself. His breath hung in the air, proof that the heating had been turned off again. Winter mornings in Asheville, North Carolina, had a way of creeping into every corner of their small apartment, chilling it to the bone. "Tyson, breakfast!" His mom's voice called from the kitchen, upbeat but carrying the weight of exhaustion. Tyson sat up, rubbing his hands together for warmth. His gaze drifted to the stack of unpaid bills on his desk. They seemed taller than yesterday, each envelope a silent accusation. He pulled on his worn jacket, glancing briefly at the photo of him and his mom on the nightstand. She was smiling, as always, but the lines of worry on her face were unmistakable. In the cramped kitchen, his mom stood by the stove, flipping pancakes on their only pan. Her uniform was freshly ironed, though it couldn't hide how threadbare it was. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice bright. She turned and handed him a plate of 2 small pancakes. "Big day at school?" Tyson forced a smile. "Just the usual, Mom." Her eyes searched his face. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" He nodded quickly, shoveling a bite of pancake into his mouth to avoid the conversation. He hated lying, but what could he say? That the weight of their struggles was suffocating him. That he couldn't stop worrying about how much longer they could hold on to the apartment. As he headed out the door, her voice stopped him. "Tyson, remember, whatever happens, we're in this together." "Yeah, Mom, I know," he replied, trying to sound confident as he shouldered his tattered backpack. The cold air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside. Asheville's streets were quiet this early, save for the hum of distant cars. He adjusted his hood and started walking, his sneakers crunching against the frosty pavement. Passing through the wealthier part of town always filled him with a mix of awe and unease. The towering Collins Enterprise building stood tall, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the pale morning sun. Lost in thought, Tyson didn't notice the commotion ahead until he was nearly upon it. A sleek black car had skidded to a stop, its tires leaving long tracks on the icy road. Nearby, a woman, heavily pregnant, was slumped against a lamppost, her face pale and her hands clutching her stomach. "Help!" someone shouted, but the people nearby hesitated, unsure of what to do. Tyson froze. His mom's warnings about staying out of trouble echoed in his mind. But then he saw the fear in the woman's eyes, her knees buckling as she started to collapse. Without thinking, he ran toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady despite the hammering in his chest. The woman shook her head weakly. "The baby. It's too early." Tyson knelt beside her, helping her to the ground gently. "Stay with me," he said firmly, glancing around for help. "Somebody call 911. A man in a suit emerged from the nearby building, his face etched with panic. "Anna!" he shouted, rushing over. Tyson turned to him. "She needs an ambulance now." Yes, of course," the man stammered, fumbling with his phone. Just keep her calm." Tyson nodded, keeping a steady hand on the woman's shoulder. "You're going to be okay," he assured her. "Help is coming." The sound of approaching sirens broke through the tense air. Paramedics rushed in, carefully transferring the woman onto a stretcher. Tyson stepped back, his hands trembling as the weight of what just happened hit him. The man in the suit turned to him, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. "You saved her," the man said, his voice thick. "What's your name?" "Tyson," he said quietly. "Tyson," the man repeated as if committing it to memory. "I won't forget this." As the ambulance sped away, Tyson stood frozen on the icy sidewalk, unaware that several bystanders had been filming the scene. The weight of what he had done, and the attention it had drawn, began to sink in. Tyson's footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway as he climbed the stairs to their apartment. The events of the morning replayed in his mind, the panic on the woman's face, the icy sidewalk, the flashing lights of the ambulance. Even now, hours later, his heart felt heavy with a strange mixture of pride and unease. He opened the door to the familiar sight of their cramped living room. The space was warm but cluttered, the furniture mismatched and worn. On the small dining table, a fraying tablecloth barely concealed the stack of unopened bills. "Tyson, is that you?" his mom called from the kitchen. "Yeah, it's me," he replied, setting his backpack down by the couch. His mom appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You're late. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Tyson mumbled, avoiding her eyes. He grabbed an apple from the counter, biting into it more to avoid talking than out of hunger. She wasn't convinced. "You've got that look," she said, stepping closer. "Like something's on your mind. Want to tell me about it?" Tyson shook his head. "It's nothing, Mom. Just a busy day." She sighed, brushing a hand over his hair. "All right, but you know I'm here if you need to talk." He nodded, grateful for her understanding but unwilling to share. How could he explain what had happened without sounding like he was boasting? Or worse, worrying her? The evening passed in quiet routine. Tyson retreated to his room, staring at his textbooks but unable to focus. Outside, the wind whistled against the windows, carrying with it the weight of unspoken questions. The knock on the door came just as the first light of dawn seeped through the blinds. Tyson's mom, already dressed for her morning shift, opened it cautiously. "Mrs. Carter?" A man's deep voice resonated from the hallway. "Yes, can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious but polite. Tyson appeared behind her, rubbing his eyes. When he saw the man standing there, his breath caught. It was the same man from yesterday, the one who had called out to the pregnant woman, his wife. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, a briefcase in one hand and an air of quiet authority around him. "Good morning," the man said, his eyes scanning the modest apartment before settling on Tyson. "I'm James Collins. May I come in?" Mrs. Carter glanced at Tyson, who nodded slightly. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. James entered, his polished shoes clicking against the worn linoleum floor. He seemed out of place among the faded wallpaper and second-hand furniture, yet his demeanor remained warm. "I hope I'm not intruding," he began, his gaze shifting between Tyson and his mom. "I wanted to thank you personally for what you did yesterday. You saved my wife's life." Tyson shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would have done." James shook his head. "No, son. Plenty of people stood by and did nothing. You stepped up. That's rare." From his briefcase, he pulled out a neatly wrapped envelope and placed it on the table. "As a token of my gratitude, I'd like you to have this." Tyson stared at the envelope, his heart sinking. Even without opening it, he knew what it contained. "I can't accept that," he said firmly, pushing the envelope back. James frowned slightly, clearly not expecting the refusal. "It's not charity, Tyson. It's a thank you. You deserve it." Tyson's mom interjected gently, her voice laced with both pride and concern. "Mr. Collins, we appreciate your kindness, but Tyson's always been the kind of boy to stand on his principles. It's just who he is." James studied Tyson, a flicker of respect crossing his features. "All right," he said, sliding the envelope back into his briefcase. "But if not this, then let me offer you something else." Tyson raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "A scholarship," James said simply. "I have the resources to help you get a proper education, one that can open doors for you. It's not a handout. It's an investment in someone who's shown courage and potential." Tyson hesitated, the weight of the offer pressing down on him. His mom placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip steady but encouraging. "Tyson," she said softly, "this could be the chance you've been waiting for. You've always talked about wanting more for yourself, for us." "But Mom," Tyson began, his voice faltering. The idea of stepping into a world so far removed from their own was terrifying. What if he failed? What if he didn't belong? James, sensing his hesitation, leaned forward. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. "Take the day to think about it. Talk it over with your mom. But I'll need an answer by tomorrow." As he stood to leave, James extended a hand. Tyson shook it hesitantly, the man's firm grip a reminder of the gravity of the decision before him. "I'll be waiting for your call," James said, his voice steady. Whatever you choose, know that the opportunity is yours. After the door closed behind him, the apartment fell into a heavy silence. Tyson sank into a chair, his thoughts swirling. His mom knelt beside him, her eyes searching his. "Tyson," she said gently, "you don't have to do this for me. But if you think this could be good for you, don't let fear hold you back." He looked at her, the lines of worry on her face softened by hope. "I'll think about it," he promised, though his chest tightened with the weight of uncertainty. As the day wore on, Tyson couldn't shake the question from his mind. By nightfall, he found himself staring at the phone, James's business card clutched in his hand. One call could change everything, but it could also turn his life upside down. The crumpled business card lay on Tyson's bedside table, its sharp edges catching the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through his window. He hadn't slept all night, his mind replaying James Collins's words. It's an opportunity, one that could change everything. Change everything? That was what scared him the most. He sat up in bed, his knees pulled to his chest. Around him, the small room was a testament to their struggles. Peeling paint, a lone bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a stack of overdue bills spilling onto the floor. Tyson glanced at them, the red final notice stamps glaring back at him like silent accusations. He thought of his mom, always pushing herself to the limit, taking on extra shifts and skipping meals to make sure he had enough. Her words from yesterday lingered. "Don't let fear hold you back, Tyson. This isn't just for you, it's for us." But stepping out of his comfort zone felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. What if he failed? What if he wasn't good enough for this world of scholarships and prestigious schools? The silence of the early morning was broken by the creak of the door. His mom peeked in, her face weary but kind. "Still awake?" she asked, coming to sit beside him. Tyson nodded, staring at the floor. "I can't stop thinking about it, Mom. What if I mess up? What if I don't belong there?" She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Tyson, you've got a chance to do something incredible. You've always been smart, always dreamed big, even when we didn't have much. This is your chance to turn those dreams into reality." "But what if it's too much?" he whispered, his voice cracking. His mom tilted his chin up gently, her eyes meeting his. "Life has already been too much for us, hasn't it? We've faced worse, Tyson. And look, we're still here, still fighting. You can do this because you've already done so much more than you realize." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket, soothing the chaos in his mind. For the first time that night, he felt a glimmer of courage break through the fog of doubt. Later that morning, the phone rang, its shrill tone breaking the stillness. Tyson hesitated before answering. "Tyson, it's James Collins." The man's voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable weight. "I just wanted to check in. Have you given any more thought to the offer?" Tyson gripped the receiver tightly. "I have," he said, though the words felt like stones in his mouth. "And? I'll do it," Tyson said, his breath hitching. "I'll take the scholarship." A pause. Then came Collins's reply, steady and measured. "That's the right choice, Tyson. But there's one more thing. The school requires all scholarship recipients to pass an entrance exam. It's tough, but I believe you can do it." Tyson's stomach dropped. "An exam?" "Yes. You'll receive the details in the mail soon. Don't worry. I'll make sure you have everything you need to prepare." As Tyson hung up the phone, his hands were trembling. This was happening, really happening. The safety net of his old life, as frayed as it was, had been pulled away. Now he stood on the brink of something entirely unknown. That evening, a crisp envelope arrived, bearing the school's elegant crest. Inside was a letter outlining the exam requirements: advanced math, critical reasoning, and a timed essay. Tyson stared at the list, feeling the weight of the task ahead settle squarely on his shoulders. He showed the letter to his mom, her eyes widening as she read. "This is serious," she said, though her tone was laced with pride. "But Tyson, you've got this." "I'm not so sure," he admitted. "What if I blow it?" "Then you'll pick yourself up and try again," she said firmly. "But you won't blow it because you're going to give it everything you've got." Her unwavering belief bolstered him, but the fear didn't fully leave. As he lay in bed that night, The letter sat on his desk, its pristine paper a stark contrast to the worn furniture around it. This wasn't just a test, it was a doorway to a world he'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. Tomorrow, he'd start preparing. But for now, he let the enormity of it all wash over him, knowing that he couldn't turn back. The sound of the mail slot rattling jolted Tyson awake. He stumbled out of bed, still groggy from another restless night, and grabbed the thick envelope sitting on the doormat. His name, printed neatly across the front, stared back at him. Opening it, he found the details for the entrance exam, topics, instructions, and a test date circled in red. 2 weeks. That was all the time he had. The weight of the task ahead sank in as Tyson clutched the letter. He thought about his mom's words the night before. "You've got this, Tyson. Just try your best." But doubt gnawed at him. Did he really have what it took? That afternoon, Tyson found himself at the library, a place he had often retreated to when he needed a break from the pressures of home. Today, however, it wasn't a refuge. It was a battlefield. Stacks of books towered around him, their titles daunting. Advanced mathematics, critical thinking strategies, essay writing for excellence. As he flipped through the pages, Tyson's confidence began to crumble. The material was overwhelming, filled with concepts he had never encountered in his underfunded school. "This is impossible," he muttered, slamming a book shut. "Need some help?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. Tyson looked up to see a woman standing nearby. Her name tag read Harper, and her warm smile was both reassuring and intimidating. She was probably in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor softened by kind eyes. I don't know where to start," Tyson admitted, gesturing to the mountain of books. "I have 2 weeks to learn all of this." Harper pulled out a chair and sat across from him. "Well, 2 weeks isn't a lot of time," she said matter-of-factly, "but it's enough if you work smart." Tyson sighed. "I'm not sure I can do it. I didn't exactly go to a school that prepared me for this kind of thing." Harper tilted her head, studying him. "You're not the first person to feel that way. I used to be in your shoes, you know." He blinked. "You?" She nodded. "Grew up in a neighborhood not too different from this one. Barely made it through high school. But someone believed in me and gave me a shot. I worked hard and here I am, teaching others how to climb their own mountains." Tyson leaned back, absorbing her words. "So, you think I have a chance?" "I think you've got more than a chance," she said firmly. "But you have to believe it too." Over the next few days, Harper became Tyson's guide. She showed him how to break down complex problems, manage his time, and focus on his strengths. Her teaching style was direct but encouraging. And slowly, Tyson began to grasp concepts that had once seemed impossible. At home, his mom continued to be his greatest cheerleader. She stayed up late with him, brewing cups of tea and occasionally quizzing him on vocabulary words. "I'm proud of you, Tyson," she said one evening as she placed a steaming mug next to his growing stack of notes. "No matter what happens, remember, you're already winning by trying." Her words carried him through the nights when frustration threatened to take over. 1 week into his preparation, Tyson faced his first major setback. A practice test left him feeling defeated. He stared at the low score, the numbers blurring through his tears. "I can't do this," he whispered. But Harper refused to let him give up. "Mistakes are part of learning," she reminded him. "Every wrong answer brings you closer to the right one." With her help, Tyson analyzed the test, pinpointing where he had gone wrong. Slowly but surely, his confidence began to rebuild. As the exam date loomed closer, the library became Tyson's second home. One evening, Harper handed him a fresh practice test, her expression serious but encouraging. "Clock's ticking, Tyson," she said. "Let's see how much you've learned." Tyson sat at the table, the test in front of him and a timer set to 1 hour. As he worked through the questions, he felt the familiar pangs of doubt creeping in. But he pushed them aside, focusing on everything Harper and his mom had taught him. When the timer beeped, he handed the test back to Harper, his hands trembling. She graded it in silence, her pen moving quickly across the paper. Finally, she looked up and smiled. "Well done, Tyson. You're ready." Tyson exhaled, relief washing over him. But as he packed up his things, a new wave of anxiety hit. The real test was just days away. and failure still felt like a very real possibility. That night, he sat at his desk, the test letter pinned to the wall above him. Books and notes surrounded him, but it was the ticking of the clock that held his attention. Each second brought him closer to the moment of truth. Can I really do this? He wondered. The only answer lay ahead. Tyson clutched his backpack tightly as he stepped off the bus. The sprawling, glass-paneled building in front of him gleamed under the morning sun, a sharp contrast to the weathered bricks of the library he had grown so familiar with. He looked around, taking in the polished cars pulling up to the curb and the sea of teenagers spilling out, each dressed in crisp uniforms or stylish outfits that screamed privilege. "Here goes nothing," Tyson muttered, his voice barely audible over the chatter around him. The entrance hall of the testing center was vast, its marble floors echoing the sounds of footsteps and hushed conversations. Tyson's worn sneakers squeaked as he walked across, drawing curious glances. He kept his head down, hyper-aware of his plain button-up shirt and thrift store jeans. At the check-in desk, the proctor handed him a badge with his name and room number. "Good luck," she said with a perfunctory smile. Tyson mumbled a thank you and shuffled toward the assigned room, his palms clammy. As he entered, he scanned the rows of desks neatly arranged in the spacious room. The other candidates, most of whom appeared at ease, were engrossed in their notes or chatting in hushed tones. Tyson slid into a seat near the back, feeling their eyes briefly land on him before shifting away. The tension in his chest tightened. The clock struck 9, and the room fell silent. The proctor stepped forward, her voice crisp as she outlined the rules. Tyson's heart raced as she placed the first set of test booklets on each desk. "This is it," he whispered to himself. The questions were as daunting as he had feared. Advanced algebra equations stared back at him, their complexity mocking his efforts. Tyson took a deep breath, recalling Harper's advice. Start with what you know. Break it down, one step at a time. He focused, methodically working through each problem, blocking out the shuffling papers and occasional coughs around him. When the essay portion arrived, he hesitated. The prompt asked for a discussion on overcoming adversity, a topic that hit far too close to home. Tyson hesitated, then began to write, pouring his struggles and hopes onto the page. The third segment of the exam was unexpected, a group challenge. Tyson's name was called along with 4 others, and they were led to a separate room. The task required collaboration to solve a complex logistical problem. From the outset, the dynamic was strained. One boy with a blazer too sharp for his age dominated the conversation, dismissing Tyson's input with a dismissive wave. "Let's not waste time on ideas that won't work," he said, earning nods from the others. Tyson clenched his jaw, the frustration boiling inside him. But as the clock ticked and their progress stalled, he noticed a critical flaw in their plan. Taking a chance, he spoke up. "Wait," Tyson said firmly, his voice cutting through the bickering. "That approach won't work because it ignores the resource constraints. Look, if we do it this way." He quickly sketched an alternative on the provided sheet, his years of managing scarce resources at home guiding his logic. The group paused, skepticism etched on their faces, but as they reviewed his plan, their expressions shifted. "That actually makes sense," the girl sitting across from him admitted reluctantly. Reluctantly at first, the group implemented Tyson's idea. When the proctor returned to evaluate their solution, she gave a small nod of approval. "Well done," she said, marking her notes. Tyson exhaled, a small flicker of pride igniting inside him. By the time the final section ended, Tyson felt drained but relieved. He gathered his things, avoiding eye contact with the other students as they filed out of the building. Outside, he sank onto a bench, staring at the bustling street ahead. Did I do enough? He wondered aloud. The thought gnawed at him, but for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to hope. Later that evening, Tyson sat at his cluttered desk, scrolling through his email to distract himself from the wait. His breath hitched when a notification popped up. Special announcement regarding your results. With trembling hands, he clicked on it. Tyson stared at the email subject line for what felt like an eternity. Special announcement regarding your results. He hesitated, his heart pounding. His hand hovered over the mouse before he finally clicked. The email opened with the words he never thought he'd see. "Congratulations. You have successfully passed the examination and are invited to the final interview with our admissions board." For a moment, the room was silent. Then it hit him, a wave of relief, excitement, and disbelief all at once. Tyson leaped from his chair, barely able to contain himself. "Mom!" he yelled, bolting into the living room. His mother, seated on the worn-out couch, looked up from the bills she was organizing. "What's wrong?" she asked, her face quickly shifting to concern. "I passed, Mom. I made it through the test. They want me for the final interview." His words tumbled out, his grin wide and uncontainable. For a beat, she just stared at him, the weight of the news slowly sinking in. Then she stood and wrapped him in a tight embrace, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Tyson, I knew you could do it," she said, her voice trembling. "You've worked so hard for this." He held on to her, feeling a rare and profound sense of accomplishment. But as her grip loosened and she pulled back to look at him, a familiar unease crept in. "There's still an interview," he admitted, the excitement fading slightly. "And it's not just about academics. They'll evaluate everything else." That evening, Tyson sat at the kitchen table with his mom and Harper. The table was scattered with papers, interview tips Harper had printed out, potential questions and notes about Tyson's strengths. "They'll want to know about your character," Harper explained, adjusting her glasses. "What motivates you, how you handle challenges, and what kind of person you are." "Yeah," Tyson muttered, staring at the list of hypothetical questions. "What if they don't like my answers? What if I sound, I don't know, stupid?" His mother placed a hand over his. "Listen to me, Tyson," she said firmly. "You've faced more challenges in your 17 years than most people face in a lifetime. Speak from the heart. Be yourself. That's more valuable than any rehearsed answer." Harper nodded in agreement. "She's right. And remember, your story is unique. You've overcome so much. Don't be afraid to show them who you are." Her words offered a flicker of comfort, but the doubt still lingered. Tyson leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "This is bigger than me," he murmured. "What if I let everyone down?" "You won't," his mom replied softly. "Just take it one step at a time, like you've always done." As Tyson prepared to call it a night, his phone buzzed on the bedside table. He glanced at the screen. Collins. "Tyson, congratulations," Mr. Collins' voice boomed through the speaker. "You've done well." "Thank you, sir," Tyson replied, his voice cautious. He wasn't sure what to expect from the man who'd both offered him a lifeline and unintentionally placed him under immense pressure. "I hear the interview process can be intimidating," Mr. Collins continued. "I'd like to help you prepare. We'll arrange a time to meet this week." The offer caught Tyson off guard. "Really? You'd do that?" "Of course. Consider it an investment in you. Rest up, Tyson. You'll need it." The call ended, leaving Tyson feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. But before he could fully process it, his phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. "There's something you should know before the interview." Tyson sat up straight, his pulse quickening. What did that mean? He typed a response but hesitated to send it. Instead, he stared at the cryptic message, unease settling over him like a heavy blanket. Tyson stared at the text message again, the words repeating in his mind like an unsettling echo. "Be careful with the interview. There are things you don't know about it. Who would send something like this and why now?" He shoved the phone into his pocket, but the unease lingered. The next day, Tyson walked briskly to the cafe where Mr. Collins had asked to meet him. The air was crisp, and the quiet hum of the neighborhood was interrupted by the faint clang of distant construction. The small cafe sat snugly between a laundromat and a thrift store, a cozy haven for locals seeking warmth on a cold day. Inside, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries greeted him. Mr. Collins waved from a corner table by the window. His tailored suit and polished demeanor stood out starkly against the simple surroundings. "Tyson, over here," he called out warmly, gesturing to the seat opposite him. Tyson slid into the chair, his nervous energy evident. "Thanks for meeting me, sir." Collins smiled, his eyes sharp but kind. "You're welcome. I thought we could talk strategy." A bit of preparation never hurts. The conversation began lightly, with Mr. Collins asking Tyson about his thoughts on the exam and how he was feeling. Gradually, the tone shifted. "Tyson," Mr. Collins began, leaning forward slightly, "this interview isn't just about academics. The board will want to see who you are beyond the grades. They're looking for individuals who can lead, inspire, and connect with others." Tyson nodded slowly, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his napkin. "But what if I'm not enough? I mean, I've never done anything like this before." "That's precisely why you're enough," Collins said firmly. "Your story, your resilience, your perspective is unique. Don't try to compete with the polished resumes of other candidates. Speak from the heart, Tyson. Be authentic." Tyson absorbed the words, feeling a flicker of reassurance, but then Collins's expression darkened slightly. "I won't sugarcoat it," Collins continued. "There are members of the board who don't believe in giving opportunities to candidates from disadvantaged backgrounds. They'll question whether someone like you belongs in their world." The words landed heavily, stirring a mix of frustration and determination within Tyson. "So it's not just about proving myself, it's about changing their minds." "Exactly," Collins said, his voice steady. "But don't let that pressure consume you. Use it to fuel your confidence. Remember, Tyson, this isn't just about you. It's about challenging stereotypes and opening doors for others who come after you." As the conversation wound down, Collins leaned back and offered one final piece of advice. "Tyson, tell your story honestly. Show them your character, your grit, and your potential. That's your strength." Tyson nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." Collins smiled approvingly. "I know you will." As Tyson exited the cafe, his mind buzzed with thoughts of the upcoming interview. The stakes felt higher now, but so did his resolve. Yet just as he turned the corner, a hand tapped his shoulder. He spun around to see a man in a dark coat and hat standing unnervingly close. "Tyson Reed," the man said, his voice low and deliberate. "There's more to that interview than you've been told. If you want to succeed, you need to know the truth." Before Tyson could ask anything, the man disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind only a sense of foreboding and more questions than answers. The man's cryptic warning lingered in Tyson's mind as he made his way home. "There's more to that interview than you've been told. If you want to succeed, you need to know the truth. Who was he? Why did he care?" Questions swirled, but answers felt impossibly out of reach. Tyson stepped into the small apartment he shared with his mother, the scent of chicken soup simmering on the stove wrapped around him like a warm embrace, momentarily grounding his racing thoughts. His mother turned from the counter with a smile, holding a ladle. "Dinner's almost ready. How was the meeting with Mr. Collins?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with curiosity. Tyson hesitated, setting his backpack down near the door. "It was good. He gave me a lot to think about." His mother raised an eyebrow, sensing the unspoken weight in his words. "Want to talk about it?" They sat at the small kitchen table, its worn edges a testament to years of shared meals and quiet conversations. Tyson shared his concerns, the expectations for the interview, Mr. Collins's revelations, and the cryptic text message that left him uneasy. "Tyson," his mother began after a pause, "I know this feels like a lot, but remember, they don't need to see someone perfect. They need to see someone real, someone who doesn't give up no matter what." Her words settled over him like a blanket on a cold night, offering comfort and a sliver of clarity. Yet, the doubt lingered. Later that night, with his mother asleep, Tyson opened his laptop and began searching. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, "Harold Kent Interview Controversy." The search results revealed an unsettling history. Harold Kent, a prominent member of the interview panel, had once publicly criticized the school's outreach program for disadvantaged students. One article suggested that he had even influenced interview outcomes to align with his biases. Tyson's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about proving himself capable. It was about standing up to deeply rooted prejudice. As he scrolled, another article caught his eye. It detailed a past scandal involving falsified interview scores, leading to an investigation. Though the school had publicly condemned the act, whispers of lingering corruption within the system persisted. Tyson leaned back in his chair, the glow of the screen reflecting his growing unease. Could he walk into that room and expect a fair chance? The following morning, a call from an unknown number interrupted his thoughts. He hesitated but answered. "Tyson Reed?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" he replied cautiously. "I'm the one who sent you the text," she said. "Meet me at Evergreen Park tonight. There's something you need to know." The line went dead before Tyson could ask anything more. As night fell, Tyson found himself in Evergreen Park. The quiet stillness of the park felt almost eerie under the dim streetlights. A figure emerged from the shadows near a bench. A woman in her 60s, her sharp features softened by kind eyes. "I'm Diana," she said, extending a hand. "I graduated from the school years ago. I've seen what happens behind closed doors." Tyson sat beside her, his heart pounding. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve a fair chance," she said simply. "There are people on that panel who will judge you for things beyond your control. Your background, your family. But you can show them they're wrong." She handed him a folder. "This contains everything you need to know about the panel, who they are, what they value, and what they fear. Use it wisely." Tyson flipped through the pages, his eyes widening at the detailed profiles and notes. "Why are you helping me?" Diana smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped me when I was in your shoes. I want to do the same." As she rose to leave, she added, "But be careful, Tyson. Not everyone wants to see you succeed." Tyson watched her disappear into the shadows, clutching the folder tightly. His determination burned brighter, but so did his questions. Who else was watching and what dangers awaited? The cool evening air clung to Tyson's skin as he stepped into his dimly lit apartment. The folder from Diana clenched tightly in his hand. The weight of her words lingered. "Prove them wrong with your actions, not your words." It was easier said than done. He slipped into his small bedroom, closing the door behind him to shut out the comforting hum of his mother moving around in the kitchen. Dropping the folder onto his cluttered desk, Tyson stared at it for a moment before sitting down. The sharp edge of the worn wooden chair pressed into his back, a dull reminder of the reality he couldn't escape. Taking a deep breath, he opened the folder. The first page held a list of names. Tyson recognized a few. Harold Kent stood out immediately. His reputation for opposing scholarships for students from underprivileged backgrounds wasn't just a rumor. The notes in Diana's neat handwriting confirmed what Tyson feared. Kent was more than a skeptic. He actively influenced decisions to ensure candidates like Tyson faced greater scrutiny. Tyson flipped through the rest of the pages, each more revealing than the last. There were personality profiles, meeting summaries, even a few handwritten memos about previous candidates. The sheer depth of the information overwhelmed him. One line underlined in red caught his attention. Kent prioritizes Polish over potential. He expects candidates to conform to his expectations, not challenge them. A lump formed in Tyson's throat. How could he possibly meet those expectations? He leaned back, closing his eyes as doubt seeped in. Was this fight even worth it? "Dinner's ready, Ty," his mother called softly from the kitchen. He emerged reluctantly, his steps heavy. As they sat at the table, the familiar warmth of their small home did little to soothe his anxiety. His mother noticed the tension etched across his face. "Something's bothering you," she said gently. Tyson hesitated, then let the words spill out. He told her about Diana, the folder, and his fears about facing someone like Kent in the interview. His mother listened intently, her hands still as she cradled a steaming bowl of soup. "Tyson," she said after a moment, "you've never let people like him define who you are. Why start now?" "But what if they don't give me a chance?" Tyson's voice cracked. "What if no matter what I do, it's not enough?" She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "Then you'll know you tried, and that's what matters. They don't need to see someone perfect. They need to see someone real." Her words settled into Tyson's chest, filling the hollow ache with a spark of hope. He nodded, though the uncertainty still lingered. Later that evening, Tyson sat back at his desk, staring at the folder. He closed it firmly, setting it aside. Diana's advice replayed in his mind. Prove them wrong with your actions. He opened his notebook and began jotting down notes about his story. Moments of struggle, perseverance, and growth. As the pages filled, he felt a small sense of control returning. This was who he was, and no one could take that from him. A knock at the door startled him. Marcus, a classmate from school, stood in the hallway holding a book. "Hey," Marcus said, slightly out of breath. "I heard about your interview. Thought this might help." He handed over a worn copy of Mastering the Art of Interviews. Tyson blinked in surprise. "Why? Why would you do this?" Marcus shrugged. "Because I know what you're capable of. You've always had it in you, man. Now you just have to show them." Tyson smiled, gripping the book tightly. "Thanks, Marcus. This means a lot." As the night wore on, Tyson felt a quiet determination settle over him. But just as he began to feel prepared, his phone buzzed on the desk. "Tyson, it's Collins," the voice on the other end said. "I just wanted to let you know the interview's been moved up. It's happening in 2 days." Tyson's heart sank. 2 days. Tyson woke up before the sun. The quiet hum of the refrigerator in the small apartment was the only sound as he sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the outfit his mother had laid out for him the night before. A simple button-up shirt and neatly pressed pants. Nothing flashy, but it carried the weight of her sacrifices. The air was heavy with anticipation as Tyson got ready. In the living room, his mother fussed over a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "You'll be fine," she said softly, her voice more for herself than for him. Tyson nodded, not trusting himself to speak. When they arrived at the school's grand entrance, Tyson was struck by the sheer scale of the place. The towering pillars, manicured lawns, and marble floors felt like they belonged to another world. His mother reached for his hand as they stepped inside, her grip firm and reassuring. "Tyson," a familiar voice called out. It was Mr. Collins, walking toward them with an encouraging smile. "This is it, kid. Just remember, you're here for a reason." The interview room was intimidating. 5 members of the admissions committee sat behind a long table, their expressions unreadable. Tyson's gaze briefly met that of Harold Kent, whose cold demeanor sent a shiver down his spine. As Tyson took his seat, the room felt smaller, the air heavier. The first few questions were manageable. Tyson spoke honestly about his life, his aspirations, and the challenges he faced growing up. But each time he glanced at Mr. Kent, the man's piercing gaze seemed to chip away at his confidence. "You've been through a lot," one of the women on the panel said kindly, breaking the tension. "Your resilience is admirable." Tyson managed a small smile, but his relief was short-lived. Mr. Kent leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You've spoken a lot about empathy and resilience. Do you really think those qualities are enough to succeed academically?" The question was like a punch to the gut. Tyson hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. He remembered his mother's words that morning and the countless times she had reminded him of his worth. "No," Tyson said firmly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Empathy alone isn't enough, but it's what gives me the strength to face challenges head-on. It's what has kept me going when everything else seemed impossible." A murmur of approval passed through a few members of the committee, but Mr. Kent's expression remained unreadable. Then came the unexpected. "Tyson," another panelist began, "your essay on societal inequality was quite thought-provoking. Can you elaborate on what inspired you to write it?" Tyson blinked, surprised they had brought up the essay. "I wrote it because I've lived it," he said after a moment. "I've seen what happens when people are overlooked, when their potential is dismissed because of their circumstances. I wrote it because I believe everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves." The room fell silent. For the first time, Tyson felt like he was being heard. As the interview neared its end, Tyson was asked for a specific example of how he had helped someone despite his own struggles. He recounted the night he helped Mrs. Collins after her accident. His voice wavered as he described the moment he realized that doing the right thing wasn't about recognition. It was about making a difference. When the final question was asked, Tyson stood to leave, his legs shaky but his heart steady. The committee gave no indication of their decision, their expressions neutral. As he stepped into the hallway, his mother waiting with hopeful eyes, Mr. Kent's voice called after him, Tyson. Tyson turned. Mr. Kent's lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "You were right in there," he said, his tone as inscrutable as ever. "But being right doesn't always mean it's enough." The words lingered in the air as Tyson walked away, a mix of pride and uncertainty swirling in his chest. The apartment was quieter than usual that evening. Tyson sat on the worn-out couch, his hands clasped tightly together as his mother set down 2 steaming cups of tea. The echoes of Mr. Kent's words from the interview still lingered in his mind, wrapping around his thoughts like a persistent fog. "You've done your part, Tyson," his mother said gently, sitting down beside him. "Now it's out of your hands." "I know, Mom," Tyson replied, though his voice betrayed the weight on his shoulders. "But what if it wasn't enough? What if he's right, that being right doesn't matter?" His mother reached for his hand, squeezing it firmly. "That man doesn't define your worth, you do, and you've proven more than enough just by making it this far." They fell into a comfortable silence, the kind that comes only from years of enduring challenges together. Tyson looked around the room, at the patched-up curtains and the faint marks on the walls that bore witness to years of struggle. His mind replayed the moments that had brought them to this point. His mother working endless shifts, the nights spent studying by the dim light of a borrowed lamp, and the countless sacrifices that had shaped their journey. "I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you," Tyson said, his voice soft. His mother smiled through tear-filled eyes. "You're here because you never gave up, Tyson. Remember that." The sound of a knock broke their quiet moment. Tyson opened the door to find Marcus standing there, a nervous energy about him. "Hey," Marcus began, stepping inside. "I've got something you need to hear." Marcus plopped down on the couch, leaning forward conspiratorially. "Word is Mr. Kent holds a lot of sway in that committee, and he's not exactly a fan of people from, our side of town." Tyson felt his chest tighten. "So you're saying he could ruin my chances no matter what I did in that room?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "But I thought you should know. Maybe you can, prepare for whatever's next." Tyson tried to focus on Marcus's words, but his thoughts spun out of control. Could everything he had worked for really come down to the whims of one man? And if so, was there anything he could do to change it? Later that night, Tyson sat alone in his room, the soft hum of the city outside his window. The folder Diana had given him sat unopened on his desk. He reached for it, flipping through the pages that detailed the members of the interview panel. Each line of text painted a vivid picture of the obstacles he faced. One note stood out: Harold Kent's well-documented history of opposing scholarships for unconventional candidates. Tyson clenched his fists, anger bubbling beneath the surface. He thought about using the information in the folder to craft a strategy, to outsmart the man who seemed determined to keep him from succeeding. But then, his mother's words replayed in his mind. "You define your worth." Closing the folder, Tyson pushed it aside. "No shortcuts," he muttered to himself. "If I win, it's because I stayed true to myself." Just as he began to feel the first flicker of clarity, his phone buzzed. Diana's name lit up the screen. "Tyson," she said, her voice serious. "I just heard something. The committee is moving faster than expected. They're meeting tomorrow to finalize the shortlist, and Mr. Kent has already called for a private discussion with the panel." Tyson's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure," Diana admitted, "but it's unusual. He might be trying to push his agenda before anyone else has a chance to weigh in." Tyson swallowed hard. "What do I do?" "Stay focused," Diana replied firmly. "Whatever he's planning, you can't let it shake you. This isn't just about proving yourself, it's about proving him wrong." Before Tyson could respond, a notification flashed on his phone screen, an email from the committee. He clicked it open, his eyes scanning the message. "Dear Tyson," it read, "to complete the selection process, you are required to participate in a special field assessment tomorrow morning. Details will follow." Tyson's heart raced as he turned the screen toward his mother. "They want me to do more. They're testing me again." His mother looked at him, her face calm but her eyes filled with determination. "Then show them what you're made of, Tyson." As he sat in the silence of the room, the weight of the challenge ahead settled over him. Whatever the committee wanted from him, He knew one thing for sure. This was the moment to rise above everything that had tried to hold him back. The morning sun filtered through the blinds as Tyson stared at the letter on the kitchen table. Its words seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "If you want the scholarship, meet me tomorrow. Tell no one." Tyson clenched his fists, pushing away the lingering doubts that swirled in his mind. He couldn't let this distract him. Today's field test was too important. As he tightened his tie in the reflection of a cracked mirror, his phone buzzed. It was a call from Mr. Collins. "Tyson, I know you're nervous, but this is your chance to shine," Mr. Collins began, his voice steady and encouraging. "The test isn't about perfection. They want to see how you handle the unexpected. Be yourself and you'll do just fine." "Thanks, sir," Tyson replied. His voice carried determination, but the knot in his stomach tightened. He wasn't sure if being himself was enough for what lay ahead. The community center bustled with activity when Tyson arrived. Volunteers scurried about preparing for the day's events. In the corner of the large hall, a group of children fidgeted restlessly around a table covered in building supplies, blocks, paper, and markers. Tyson's heart sank as he realized this was his assignment. "You'll lead this group," a coordinator explained. "Your job is to help them create a model of a community. The goal is to teach them the value of teamwork." As Tyson nodded, his gaze shifted to the back of the room. Standing tall with an air of authority, Mr. Kent watched silently, his arms crossed. Tyson could feel the weight of his scrutiny, every glance a challenge. "Great," Tyson muttered under his breath, rolling up his sleeves. "No pressure." The children, ranging in age from 7 to 10, were a mixed bag. One boy, Josh, immediately took charge, barking orders at the others. A shy girl, Emily, clutched a stack of paper but didn't speak. The rest of the group alternated between arguing and ignoring each other entirely. "All right, everyone," Tyson said, clapping his hands to get their attention. "Let's start by sharing ideas. What should our community look like?" Josh scoffed. "We don't need to talk. I already know what we should do." Emily timidly raised her hand, but her voice was lost in the chaos as Josh started stacking blocks. The others began to follow his lead, creating a disorganized mess. Frustration bubbled inside Tyson as he struggled to regain control. "Stop," he finally said, his voice firm. The group froze, their eyes wide. Tyson took a deep breath, remembering his mother's words. "Lang nga truok ki dandat." "We're a team," Tyson continued, his tone softer. "That means everyone's ideas matter. Let's take 5 minutes to hear from each other. Emily, what's your idea?" Emily hesitated before speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought maybe we could build a park in the center, so everyone has a place to play." "That's a great idea," Tyson said with a smile. "What about the rest of you?" One by one, the children began to share their thoughts. Tyson encouraged them to combine their ideas, turning the chaos into collaboration. Slowly but surely, the model began to take shape, a vibrant, cohesive community that reflected the creativity of every child. As the project wrapped up, Tyson stood back and watched the children admire their work. For the first time that day, they were smiling, laughing even. He felt a swell of pride, but the moment was short-lived. "Well done," Mr. Kent said, approaching Tyson. His tone was clipped, his expression unreadable. "But was this truly a challenge? Or did you just take the easy way out?" Tyson met his gaze, his voice steady. "Helping people work together isn't easy, sir. It takes patience and heart." Mr. Kent's lips curled into a faint smirk. "We'll see if that's enough." Before Tyson could process the exchange, a member of the organizing team approached him. "You should know," they whispered. "Mr. Kent specifically requested this task for you. He's been watching closely." The revelation sent a chill down Tyson's spine. What game was Mr. Kent playing? As Tyson prepared to leave, a staff member handed him an envelope. "This came for you." Inside was a letter bearing Mr. Kent's signature. "Meet me tomorrow," it read. "No one else can know." Tyson stared at the words, his mind racing. What could Mr. Kent want, and why the secrecy? The weight of the envelope felt heavier than it should, a harbinger of the challenge yet to come. The small apartment was unusually quiet that evening. Tyson sat on the edge of his bed, the letter from Mr. Kent clutched in his hands. The words replayed in his mind like a haunting melody. "Meet me tomorrow. Don't tell anyone." His mother called from the kitchen, breaking the stillness. "Tyson, dinner's ready. Are you all right? You've been awfully quiet since you got home." "I'm fine, Mom," he replied, though his voice betrayed him. He folded the letter and slipped it into his pocket, avoiding her gaze as he joined her at the table. The smell of warm chicken stew filled the room, but Tyson couldn't focus on eating. His mother watched him, concern etched on her face. "You know you can talk to me, right?" she said gently. Tyson nodded but said nothing. How could he explain this? The weight of the letter's ambiguity sat heavy on his shoulders. He didn't want to worry her, or admit that he wasn't sure what to do. Later that night, Tyson lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him as thoughts swirled in his mind. Was this a trap, a test, or something worse? He recalled Mr. Collins's words about staying true to himself and his mother's steadfast belief in his integrity. But the fear of making the wrong choice lingered, gnawing at his resolve. His phone buzzed, breaking his reverie. It was Marcus. "Hey," Marcus said, his voice warm but cautious. "I just wanted to check on you. Diana mentioned you might have something on your mind." Tyson hesitated before explaining the letter. Marcus listened intently. "Look," Marcus said after a pause, "I don't trust Kent. The guy's reputation is complicated. But if you're going to meet him, you have to be careful. He plays games, and not always fair ones." Another buzz came in, this time from Diana. Tyson switched to her call, relaying the same story. Diana sighed deeply. "Kent has a habit of pushing people to their limits. He's not evil, but he's relentless. Whatever he wants from you, it's a test. The question is, are you ready for it?" The calls left Tyson with more questions than answers. Yet as the night wore on, clarity began to surface. He couldn't run from this. If he wanted to move forward, he had to face Mr. Kent, whatever the cost. The following afternoon, Tyson left a note for his mother. "Meeting someone important, I'll explain later. Don't worry, I'll be back soon." He slid the note under her favorite coffee mug on the counter before heading out. The air was crisp as Tyson entered the small cafe where Mr. Kent had arranged to meet. The bell above the door jingled softly and he scanned the room. There in the corner sat Mr. Kent, a steaming cup of coffee before him. His expression was unreadable as Tyson approached. "Right on time," Mr. Kent said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Tyson sat, his shoulders tense. "Why am I here?" Tyson asked, his voice steady despite the unease simmering beneath it. Mr. Kent sipped his coffee slowly, setting the cup down with deliberate care. "I want to know something," he began. "If you had to choose between your dream and doing what's right, what would you choose?" The question struck Tyson like a bolt of lightning. He searched Mr. Kent's face for hints of his intent, but found only that same enigmatic stare. "Why does it have to be a choice?" Tyson countered. Mr. Kent leaned back, a faint smirk curling his lips. "Life often forces us to choose, Tyson. I want to see what you're willing to sacrifice." Tyson's mind raced. Was this another test? He squared his shoulders, refusing to let doubt take hold. "I'd do what's right," he said firmly. "Because if I give up my integrity, my dream won't mean anything." Mr. Kent studied him for a long moment before reaching into his briefcase. He slid a thick envelope across the table. "This," he said, "contains something you need to see. Read it carefully, and then decide if you're truly ready for what lies ahead." Tyson took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly. He glanced up, but before he could speak, Mr. Kent stood. "Good luck," Mr. Kent said, his tone inscrutable. With that, he left the cafe, leaving Tyson alone with the mysterious package. Tyson's fingers hovered over the envelope seal. His heart pounded as he opened it, revealing a stack of documents. His eyes widened as he began to read. Tyson sat frozen in the corner of the cafe. The envelope's contents spread out before him like pieces of a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. His eyes darted over the documents, each word pulling him deeper into a reality he couldn't have imagined. The first page detailed the history of the scholarship program, what he had believed to be a beacon of opportunity. But as he read further, a darker narrative emerged. Notes and reports outlined how Mr. Collins had strategically used the program to elevate his public image and expand his business empire. Students who didn't align with his vision were quietly dismissed, their potential sacrificed for Collins Enterprises' gain. Tyson's stomach churned. How could the man who had praised him so generously, who had extended a lifeline, be capable of such manipulation? His hands shook as he flipped to the next page. It revealed something even more damning: the strained relationship between Mr. Kent and Mr. Collins. Once business partners, their collaboration had dissolved after a public scandal involving a promising candidate who had been unfairly disqualified. "Are you starting to understand now?" Mr. Kent's voice interrupted Tyson's spiraling thoughts. The older man stood near the counter, his coffee cup in hand. "Collins doesn't do anything without a strategy. You were just another piece on his chessboard." Tyson felt a wave of anger rise. "Why are you showing me this?" he demanded. "What do you expect me to do with it?" Mr. Kent's expression remained unreadable. "I expect you to decide. Are you willing to look the other way for a shot at your dream, or will you stand up for what's right, even if it costs you everything?" The cafe seemed to close in around Tyson as he wrestled with the weight of the question. His mind flickered back to the moments that had shaped him: his mother's unwavering resilience, Diana's encouragement, Marcus's friendship. Their voices echoed in his head, urging him to stay true to himself. "But why me?" Tyson finally asked, his voice raw. "Why put me through this?" Mr. Kent sat down across from him, his gaze piercing. "Because you're different. Collins sees a story he can market. I see potential, someone who can break the cycle, not perpetuate it." Tyson's jaw tightened. "So I'm just another test to you? Another experiment?" Kent's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Maybe. Or maybe you're exactly what this program needs." The silence between them was thick with unspoken challenges. Tyson's fingers clenched the documents, his knuckles white. The temptation to walk away, to return to the simple ambition of winning the scholarship, whispered seductively in his mind. But his mother's voice broke through that haze. "Doing the right thing isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. I won't ignore this," Tyson said firmly, meeting Kent's gaze. "If the scholarship program is being used to hurt people, it needs to change, even if it means I lose my chance." For the first time, Kent's steely demeanor softened. "Good," he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's the answer I was looking for." Tyson frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you're not just fighting for yourself anymore. You're fighting for everyone who comes after you," Kent replied. "But don't think for a second that this is over. You've shown me you have integrity. Now I need to see if you have endurance." Kent stood, leaving Tyson with the remaining documents and a warning. "If you want to move forward, be ready. The hardest part is still ahead." As Tyson gathered the papers and left the cafe, his mind buzzed with questions. Who else knew about this? How many candidates had suffered because of Collins's ambition? And how was he supposed to expose the truth without destroying his own future? Outside, the cold night air hit him like a slap, but it did little to clear his thoughts. He glanced down at the envelope in his hands. Whatever came next, he knew one thing for certain: he couldn't face it alone. The walk home from the cafe felt longer than usual. Each step Tyson took seemed to echo the questions swirling in his mind. By the time he reached the dimly lit hallway of his apartment building, the weight of Mr. Kent's words and the damning documents he'd seen bore down on him like a storm cloud refusing to clear. Inside, the small living room was silent, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. His mother sat on the couch, knitting beneath the faint glow of a table lamp. She looked up as he entered, her warm smile quickly fading when she caught sight of his furrowed brow. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" she asked, setting her knitting aside. Tyson hesitated, then nodded, forcing a tight smile. "Yeah, just a lot to think about." She didn't press him, but the worry in her eyes lingered as he retreated to his bedroom, closing the door behind him. Alone in the cramped space, Tyson sat at his desk, pulling out a blank notebook. His pen hovered over the page before he began to write. What do you do when the people you trust the most aren't who you thought they were? The words spilled out, jagged and raw. He wrote about Mr. Kent's accusations, the evidence against Mr. Collins, and the impossible choice now before him. Expose the truth and risk everything, or stay silent and accept the scholarship that could change his and his mother's lives forever. Tyson stopped, staring at the ink smudged by his trembling hand. The memory of his mother's voice echoed in his mind. Integrity isn't just about what you do when people are watching. It's about who you are when no one else knows. His phone buzzed on the desk, jolting him from his thoughts. It was Marcus. "Hey man," Marcus said, his tone cautious. "I heard some things about Mr. Collins. Stuff about how he's handled scholarships before. Are you sure you can trust him?" "I don't know," Tyson admitted. "But what choice do I have? If I go against him, I could lose everything." There was a pause before Marcus replied. "Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that define who we are. Just be careful, okay?" The conversation left Tyson more conflicted than ever. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, when a sudden knock at the door startled him. Before he could react, his mother's voice called, "Tyson, someone's here to see you." Heart pounding, Tyson opened the door to find Mr. Collins standing in the hallway, his polished demeanor as unnerving as ever. "Tyson," Mr. Collins said, his smile as sharp as a blade. "May I have a word?" They sat in Mr. Collins's car, the luxurious interior contrasting starkly with the dim streetlights outside. Mr. Collins wasted no time. "I had a conversation with Mr. Kent," he began, his tone measured. "I trust you found him. Insightful." Tyson's throat tightened. "He mentioned some things," he said carefully. "Did he now?" Mr. Collins studied him, his eyes narrowing. "I'm sure he had plenty to say about me. He always does." Tyson clenched his fists, forcing himself to meet Mr. Collins's gaze. Why would he say those things? Collins's smile faded, replaced by something colder. "Because Kent thrives on sowing doubt. Don't let him distract you, Tyson. You're on the cusp of something extraordinary, but only if you stay focused." The tension in the car was suffocating. Tyson's instincts screamed at him to get out, but Collins leaned closer, his voice dropping. "There's a meeting next week," he said, "with the scholarship board. I need you there, Tyson. You're living proof that this program works, and I'd hate for anyone to forget that." Collins's hand lingered on the car door as Tyson stepped out. "Remember, Tyson," he called as the engine roared to life. "Trust is earned, not given." Back in his room, Tyson sat in the dark, replaying the conversation in his mind. Collins's words felt less like an invitation and more like a warning. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him like never before. Was the meeting an opportunity or a trap? The week flew by like a blur of sleepless nights and restless thoughts. Tyson stood in front of the mirror in his tiny apartment, adjusting the collar of his shirt for what felt like the 100th time. His mother, sitting nearby with a cup of tea, offered a soft, reassuring smile. "You'll be fine," she said. "Just speak from the heart, Tyson. That's all anyone can ask of you." Tyson nodded, though his stomach churned with unease. He had replayed Mr. Collins's cryptic invitation and Mr. Kent's warning over and over in his mind. The weight of what awaited him made his breath shallow as he stepped out the door. The boardroom at Collins Enterprise was a stark contrast to Tyson's modest world. High ceilings, polished mahogany, and walls adorned with abstract art exuded power and influence. Tyson hesitated for a moment at the threshold before a sharply dressed attendant guided him to a seat near the head of the table. The room buzzed with low conversation among impeccably dressed board members. At the center of it all was Mr. Collins, his commanding presence filling the space. He greeted Tyson with a firm handshake, his smile polished and unreadable. "Tyson, I'm glad you're here," Mr. Collins said. "Today is a pivotal moment, not just for you, but for the future of this program." As Tyson took his seat, his gaze fell on Mr. Kent, seated in the corner with an air of quiet scrutiny. Their eyes met briefly, and Tyson felt a chill at the faint smirk curling Kent's lips. The meeting began with Mr. Collins delivering a well-rehearsed speech about the transformative power of the scholarship program. He highlighted Tyson's journey as a prime example, his words painted with a layer of gloss that felt almost too smooth. Tyson's chest tightened. He felt like a prop being paraded to serve a narrative he wasn't entirely sure he believed in. "I've seen firsthand how this program changes lives," Mr. Collins said, gesturing toward Tyson. Young people like him are the future of our community." Then Mr. Kent stood, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "And yet, how many futures have we overlooked or dismissed along the way?" A murmur rippled through the board members as Kent continued, his tone sharp. "I've reviewed cases where applicants were denied opportunities without clear justification. If this program is to claim integrity, shouldn't we ensure its fairness?" All eyes turned to Tyson as Mr. Kent gestured toward him. "Perhaps our young candidate can shed some light on his experience." Tyson's heart raced. He felt the weight of the moment bearing down on him, every gaze in the room pressing for a response. For a fleeting second, he considered staying silent, letting the meeting move on. But then his mother's words echoed in his mind. "Speak from the heart." Taking a deep breath, Tyson stood. "I can't speak for anyone else, but I can tell you what this program has meant to me. It's given me hope when I didn't have much left." He paused, his voice steadying as he continued. "But hope isn't enough. A program like this should be about more than just appearances or statistics. It should be about creating real opportunities for people who truly need them, and treating everyone fairly in the process." The room fell silent. For a moment, Tyson thought he might have gone too far. Then one board member nodded, followed by another. A few exchanged murmurs of agreement, but the quiet approval was cut short by the icy calm of Mr. Collins. "Thank you, Tyson," he said, his tone controlled but tight. "Your perspective is enlightening." As the meeting adjourned, Mr. Kent approached Tyson, leaning in close. "That took courage," he said quietly. "But don't think for a second that your challenges are over. The game is just beginning." Tyson watched as Kent disappeared into the crowd, his words hanging in the air like a storm cloud on the horizon. The battle wasn't over. It was only just starting. The night air was heavy, seeping through the cracks of the old apartment as Tyson stepped inside, his mind spinning with echoes of the boardroom. His mother was waiting for him in the living room, her knitting needles clinking softly in the quiet. She looked up, her eyes narrowing with concern at the tension etched on her son's face. "Tyson," she began, "what happened today?" He hesitated, the weight of his thoughts too much to put into words. Instead, he shook his head and muttered, "It's just a lot, Mom. I need time to think." She didn't press further, but the worry in her gaze lingered as he retreated to his room. The glow of the television flickered against the walls as Tyson slouched onto the worn couch beside his mother. A breaking news banner flashed across the screen and the anchor's voice rang out. "In a shocking turn of events, Collins Enterprises scholarship program faces scrutiny tonight. Sources have leaked internal documents suggesting that the program may have been used to further the company's public image, while disadvantaging numerous applicants." Tyson's breath hitched as images of documents and statistics filled the screen. Among them, a photo of Mr. Collins smiling confidently at a press conference. The anchor continued. "Former business partner Harold Kent has raised concerns about the integrity of the program, claiming it has prioritized profits over fairness." Tyson felt as though the room were closing in around him. He glanced at his mother, her expression a mixture of shock and sadness. "I'm just a piece of their puzzle," Tyson whispered. "A face for their game." His mother turned to him, her voice steady but firm. "You're more than that, Tyson, and you have a choice. You can either let them define you, or you can stand for what you believe is right." Her words sank deep, but the choice ahead of him felt like a chasm too wide to cross. The shrill ring of Tyson's phone shattered the silence. Mr. Collins's name flashed across the screen. With a deep breath, he answered. "Tyson," came the smooth, practiced voice of Mr. Collins. "I'm sure you've seen the news. It's unfortunate how rumors can distort the truth." "Rumors?" Tyson asked, his voice edged with disbelief. "What about the documents, the numbers?" "They don't tell the whole story," Mr. Collins replied, a hint of irritation breaking through. "You're a smart young man. You understand how important perception is. If you stand with me, we can weather this storm together. Your future, your mother's future, will be secure." Tyson swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" The pause on the other end of the line was deafening. "Let's just say, Tyson, that opportunities like this don't come around twice. Think carefully." The call ended with a cold finality, leaving Tyson gripping the phone tightly, his knuckles white. As the clock neared midnight, a knock at the door startled Tyson. His mother opened it to find a courier holding an envelope addressed to Tyson. Inside was a letter from Mr. Kent. The letter was direct, its words cutting through the fog of Tyson's doubts. It contained copies of more incriminating documents, evidence of applicants being unfairly dismissed, and email chains discussing how to spin the scholarship program for maximum publicity. At the bottom, Mr. Kent had scrawled a personal note. The truth needs a voice. The question is, will it be yours? Tyson sat by the window, the city lights below blinking like distant stars. The letter trembled in his hands as his mother approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What are you going to do, Tyson?" she asked softly. He stared out into the night, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like an anchor. "If I do this," he said, barely above a whisper, "everything changes. But if I don't think I can live with myself." The glow of the city seemed to grow brighter, reflecting the turmoil within him. Tyson knew the choice was his, and the consequences would be immense. The morning air felt heavier than usual, thick with the weight of Tyson's decision. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the borrowed blazer that was a size too big. But it was the best he had. His mother stood behind him, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. "You're doing the right thing, Tyson," she said softly, her voice steady despite the worry in her eyes. "No matter what happens today, I'm proud of you." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks, Mom. I just hope this doesn't end up making things worse for us." Her hand squeezed his shoulder. The truth has a way of making things better in the end, even if it's hard at first. The conference room at Collins Enterprise was packed. Rows of reporters jostled for position, cameras ready, and the air buzzed with the faint hum of whispers and speculation. Mr. Collins stood at the podium, exuding confidence. His smile was as polished as the gleaming mahogany table behind him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and practiced. "Today we address the baseless accusations that have been circulating. Our scholarship program has always been about creating opportunities and changing lives. To prove this, let me introduce one of our brightest success stories, Tyson Bennett." A polite round of applause echoed as Tyson walked to the podium. His heart pounded like a drum, but his steps were steady. Mr. Collins clapped him on the back, leaning in to whisper, "Stick to the script, son. This is your moment to shine." Tyson gripped the edges of the podium, his palms damp. He looked out at the sea of faces, flashes of cameras momentarily blinding him. For a brief moment, he thought about backing down. But then he saw his mother standing at the back, her presence grounding him. He took a deep breath. "Thank you, Mr. Collins, and thank you all for being here today." Tyson began by recounting how the scholarship had given him a chance, a way out of the challenges he and his mother faced. He spoke about his gratitude, his hope, but then he shifted gears. "But," he said, his voice firmer now, "I've come to realize that the story isn't as simple as it seems." The room went silent, the hum of whispers replaced by the sharp crackle of tension. Tyson reached into his blazer and pulled out the documents Mr. Kent had given him. "These are records showing how this program has been used, not to help people like me, but to serve other interests. Applicants with better qualifications have been turned away because they didn't fit the image the program wanted to promote." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters leaned forward, pens scribbling furiously. Mr. Collins's smile faltered, his jaw tightening. "This program could be something great," Tyson continued, his voice rising with conviction. "But only if it's run with honesty and fairness, not manipulation and deceit." The room erupted. Questions flew from all directions as reporters swarmed the podium. Tyson stepped back, his breathing shallow, but a strange sense of calm settled over him. He had done it. He had told the truth. The aftermath was chaos. Mr. Collins left the room without answering a single question, his confident demeanor replaced by a stormy scowl. By the next morning, every major news outlet carried the story. Investigations were launched, and Collins Enterprise was under fire. At home, Tyson sat with his mother at their tiny kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window. For the first time in what felt like forever, The air around them felt light, unburdened. "You've done something incredible, Tyson," his mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just for yourself, but for so many others." Tyson smiled, the weight of the past weeks lifting slightly. "I just hope it makes a difference." She reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "It already has." Days later, a letter arrived in the mail, the envelope thick and embossed with the logo of a prominent nonprofit organization. Tyson opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the words. "We admire your courage and integrity in standing up for what's right. We believe you can bring the same strength and leadership to our mission." Enclosed is a full scholarship offer and an invitation to join our youth leadership program. Tyson folded the letter, a slow smile spreading across his face. His mother looked at him expectantly. "What does it say?" she asked. "It says," Tyson replied, looking out the window at the bright, endless sky, "this is just the beginning." As Tyson's journey comes to a close, we're left with a story that transcends his individual triumph. It's a reminder that standing up for what's right, no matter the cost, is a victory not just for oneself, but for those who come after. Tyson's courage teaches us that integrity and truth can illuminate even the darkest corners, and that real change begins with the choices we make today. But what about you? Have you ever faced a moment where doing the right thing meant risking something important? How did you find the strength to move forward? Or perhaps you're still navigating that decision. What lessons can Tyson's story bring to your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences or perspectives in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about courage, fairness, and the power of truth. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll continue exploring stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us all. See you in the next journey. 8.